and 4. And this class, of course, is set up in 3 sections. Well, 4 sections, but 3 sessions per section. And we did body class 1, right? So we started with the heart, the mind, and now we're talking about the body, knowing that there's 4 parts. When we start talking about new life, there's 4 parts to that new life that we are looking at. And so we're in the first session of the 4th part, right? And so that's where we went to Romans 12 and 4, because obviously that's where Paul starts talking about your body. But he says, therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So we're seeing 2 things here, right? We're seeing mind and body at this point Paul is talking about, so that you may prove what the will of God is, which is good and acceptable and perfect. For through the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think more highly of himself than he ought to think, but to think as to one having sound judgment, as God has allowed each one of you a measure of faith. Of course, it's hard for my mind not to think of how this even connects to what we were just talking about. But specifically towards what we're doing here is there's a piece there that says God has allowed it to each a measure of faith. God has allowed it to each one a measure of faith. And so when we start talking about our bodies, it's so important for us to realize, and when we say body, we're talking about what you're actually going to do. This is saying, hey, a part of my new life, a part of the new life that I'm walking in, there's things that I'm going to have to do, right? Some of those things may be, I may have to go to new places. I may have to get a new job. I may have to get a new house, right? And this is where this becomes important when Paul speaks as God is allowed to each a measure of faith, is because oftentimes we find ourselves allowing faith to be subjective. And what I mean by that is saying like, man, faith is something that I choose to apply towards what I see, versus faith being what's in me, given to me by God. God has given me a measure of faith. There are things you have the ability to believe in. This is big, because I run into a lot of people and they're like, man, I'm just don't know if I have enough faith for that. And I'm like, you probably don't, because God has given everybody a measure of faith. God has given you the capacity to believe into something. There's something that when you are walking towards it, you feel fully capable with God of achieving. There's things that don't feel insurmountable. I know this is, I love sharing stuff like this in small settings so y'all can ask questions, because oftentimes how people were introduced to faith is by faith is how you close the gap for the things you want. There's things you desire in life. There's houses you want, cars you want, whatever it is you want. And faith is your tool to get that thing. And I would say, no, that was fundamentally wrong and inaccurate. Matter of fact, what you learn as you grow in faith is that God reworks your desires. So even if you came to him desiring to be this, God will work in you to desire what he really wanted you to be. Like, I thought I was supposed to be a doctor, but it turns out, man, I'm supposed to be a dentist. And it's like, well, why did you want to be a doctor? And sometimes I find out it's just this simple. I went to somebody that was like, man, why do you believe God wants you to be the doctor? They're like, well, it's one of the top 5 earning fields in America. I'm like, I don't know if God referenced those statistics when he spoke to you. I doubt he did. But what I would tell you is you're struggling in something that I don't believe you should be struggling in. There's a difference in between needing God's strength and struggling to feel God's power. Right. Those are 2 different feelings. Like I see a lot of people that are like, man, I'm struggling to sense God in this versus, man, I need God to do this. It's important that we reconcile those emotions, reconcile those feelings, because oftentimes people find themselves in stagnant places in life because they thought faith was a tool they had to apply towards what they wanted. And it was like, God never wanted you to have that thing that ended up bankrupting you emotionally, physically, and financially. God placed in you the ability to believe in something that, no, it didn't mean that you could get it done, but you felt with him you could. Like, it felt like I needed God, but it didn't feel like I was trying to find God in it. Okay. This is so important because we're talking about what we're doing with our body. And it's so important that we start to quickly recognize when we are in spaces and places that aren't actually fulfilling us, but they're depleting us. There's a difference in between me needing God to be here and me trying to find God here. Is that clear? I'm going to give another example because I think it will help. If I was going home and I wanted to cook Alfredo pasta, well, the ingredients necessary for cooking this need to be present in my house in order to cook this. No amount of faith is going to make the ingredients appear. Either the ingredients are in the house or they're not in the house. I can pray, I can do whatever I want to do, and I can believe God said to make Alfredo. But if I open up the fridge and the ingredients aren't in there, it doesn't mean that God is lying. It means that maybe I misread it or maybe I misheard it, because I should always have the ingredients for what God is saying I should be doing. He ain't making the cake, and it may require patience, which patience may mean it's going to take me faith to be patient. I have to stir this thing. I have to work in the garlic. I have to work in the pasta. I have to work with the noodle. Like, it takes patience for the journey, and I'm not a patient person. So by faith, I'm going to be patient. You see, but God has given me the patience to do it. I'm saying that to say that I run into many people, they're opening up their fridges, not seeing the ingredients to the life they say God has called them to, and they say by faith God's going to make it happen. I'm like, no, you just saw that. We're going to ignore that. There was stuff in that fridge. What did the stuff in the fridge make? You follow me? What is that also saying? It's acknowledging that God is a just God, and whatsoever we need, he shall provide. It's also acknowledging that God is not withholding any good or beneficial thing from us. We always have to live in the state that whatever I need, God has already supplied. And he's given me the faith to do with what I have supplied. All right, cool.